Hi, everyone. Welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove, and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I received over the past 7 days. Remember, if you have any questions related to your training program, your nutritional plan, supplements you're taking, not taking, considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com. Or you can also DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, so let's get started with this week's No Filter Q&A with question number 1. Hi, Nick. I dislocated my shoulder a year ago, and it still bothers me whenever I do dumbbell flies. Is there an alternative for this exercise that I can do? Yeah, there's a few alternatives that you can do for dumbbell flies. Now, remember, when you're doing a fly motion, if it's for the front, you're trying to activate your pec minor, right, which is situated right in your armpit area, right below pec major. So typically any flying motion will help hit that, whether you're doing a flat dumbbell fly, an incline dumbbell fly, a decline dumbbell fly, although I don't advise clients to do much decline movements. But if you're looking for an alternative for dumbbell fly, a good alternative would be a cable crossover, or if you're training out of a commercial gym and you have access to one of those pec deck machines where you have the pads in. Now, why I like using the cable crossovers, especially for people who are dealing with rotator cuff injuries or in your case a dislocation, is the cable keeps it nice and smooth, and it also allows you to stay in a proper plane of motion. Sometimes with dumbbells, especially if you are dealing with an injury, remember, you have to, when you're working with free weights, you have to use your stabilizers. So what happens is if you're doing a dumbbell fly and you have a problem with your, in this case, in your shoulder, it's very hard to stabilize that free weight. So if you switch over to the cable, you don't really have to focus on stabilizing, and you can still stimulate that muscle belly. With the pec deck, the same thing. Now, if you're asking me, do I think dumbbell flies are equal to pec deck flies or cable flies? No, I still think dumbbell flies are probably the better movement because you do have to work your stabilizers. But if you're trying to rehab an injury, my recommendation would be to switch over to the cable, go light, do some progressive overload principles when you're adding into those training techniques. Start very light and then pyramid your weight up. But yeah, I would do cables. Another thing too, it's how you structure your chest workouts. If you're doing flies, maybe don't put them into the tail end of your workout. Do a few compound presses, do your incline barbell press, do a flat dumbbell press, maybe do an incline dumbbell press, and then move into flies towards the end of your workout. So at least the muscle belly's warmed up. So that's what I would do. I'd switch over to cable crossovers, or if you have access to one of those pec deck machines, and then do your flies towards the tail end of your workout. And if you have access to a resistance band, just do some resistance band flies. It doesn't have to be light. Just use a resistance band, tie it up to the edge of the squat rack, and just do some one-arm flies just for some rehabilitation work. You can do that just as a warm-up. Don't count it as an exercise, just to actually stretch out that muscle belly. And finally, the last thing I would actually do is go for go see an RMT, preferably a sports RMT, who can get into that area, because you could have a lot of scar tissue in your internal rotator cuff right here, which is causing the pull in the pec minor, right? Because everything's connected. So that's what I would do too, is I'd go for a massage, deep tissue massage, and get into that area and massage that area, and also get into your lat and into your tricep, essentially that whole area where the injury occurred when you dislocated your shoulder. And I would do that at least once or twice a week for the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and see if that helps. Oh, and another thing, I'm a lot of people know I'm a huge advocate of using topicals like Tiger Balm or Voltaren. I find those work great. So maybe apply some of that before you go in and train chest. See if that helps. Okay, next question. Hey, Nick, I get a sharp pain in my right forearm whenever I do any curls or heavy back exercises. I tried icing the area, but it doesn't help. I don't want to take time off from training, but not sure what I should do. Do you have any advice? Yes, if you're not already using them, pick up a pair today. The grabbers. So one of the things I like with the grabbers for the back is they take a lot of pressure off your forearm extensors, okay? So when it comes to these guys here, yes, we sell them, but you can also buy them online yourself. But one of the reasons I like using these guys is they take so much pressure off your forearm flexors and your forearm extensors. So essentially all you do, say you're doing a dumbbell row, the dumbbell handle would go right in here, you just wrap it around. And now essentially what's happening, you can see that, you're taking your forearm flexors and your forearm extensors out of the movement, okay, by doing your rows, by doing your pull downs, and even doing your curls. There's plenty of times when I'm training arms in the gym where I'll actually use these to help train my biceps. So I don't just use them to train my back. So, and I've talked about this before. What happens when you're doing pulling movements, whether it's a pull down, whether it's a row, whether it's a curl, anything that requires you to pull, right? Pull, pull. That puts a lot of pressure on those forearm extensors and as well as the flexors. And as I said before, there's very little muscle between point A and point B. If you look at an anatomy chart, this is basically just bone and tendon. Yeah, you could do some dumbbell wrist curls, but I'm not a firm believer in doing that stuff. Plus, I don't want to get carpal syndrome. So what I do recommend are people use what we call grabbers or training straps. And that will take a lot of pressure off your forearm extensors and will keep the pressure on where it should be, which if you're doing heavy rows, for example, will be your lats. If you're doing bicep curls, will obviously be your biceps, your brachialis, right? So that's what I'd recommend doing, first of all, is pick up a pair of grabbers or training straps, okay? Second, as I mentioned in the first question, topicals, Voltaren, Tiger Balm, lather all over those forearms. Not just once a day, guys. Like, you got to be putting that on throughout the day, especially if you're dealing with the injury and it's a chronic injury. And then, you know, you could look into doing even some potential IMS therapy on there, acupuncture. Again, the area could just be tight. The tendons could be very tight, especially if you're someone who has a physical job, or even if you're someone who works at a desk all day and you're typing, right? That puts a lot of pressure on your forearm flexors and extensors as well. So these are all little things that I would be adding in, you know, the topicals, the acupuncture, potentially IMS. And again, even if you go for massages regularly, and I recommend to most of my clients that they can go massage once or twice a week, get those forearms massaged. It's going to hurt like hell, but man, is it effective. So it sucks. I've had forearm pain before, especially when I've done curls. And usually what I'll do is that's when I start lathering the topical on for about a week, and I'll do it about 7-8 times a day. Like, I'll constantly be applying it on almost by every 2 or 3 hours. And then I have done acupuncture before for that area, and it's helped significantly, has made a huge difference. So that's worked. But honestly, nothing has helped more than the grabbers. And this is the only thing that I ever tell my clients in the gym. I say, you know what? You need these. I don't push supplements. I don't say you have to be on this diet plan. I don't say you have to do this training program. But if you want to prolong your forearm lifespan in the gym, pick up a pair of grabbers or training straps. Okay, guys, they're not expensive. $45. And I use them, honestly, I use them for every muscle group. I even like using them when I do my legs, because I like to hold dumbbells when I do my lunges. So I find, well, if I can use the grabbers to hold my dumbbells, it takes a lot of pressure off my forearms. I like to use them for chest because they give great wrist support as well. Okay, so again, you don't have to be the ones that we sell. They could be just regular training straps, but anything that's going to take pressure off the forearm extensors and your forearm flexors. All right. Next question. Hi, Nick. What's the difference between incline barbell presses versus incline dumbbell presses? So I received this question earlier this week from one of my online clients, and I thought, you know, I'm going to answer it on the Q&A because I get it a lot. And I usually get it from women more than men, because I know a lot of women don't like training their chest. They're like, well, what the hell's the difference if I do an incline barbell press versus an incline dumbbell press? So let me explain. So when you're doing a barbell movement, it's what we call a compound movement, okay? You're moving the body as a whole. When you do a dumbbell movement, it's what we call an isolation movement. So you could technically move, if you're doing 2 dumbbells, you could move them at different times, but you're going to move them together, but you are moving each arm independently, each weight independently. So that's what we call an isolation exercise. So what I like to do with my clients, especially the ones who I work with online, I'll put them on what I call 2 or 3 week rotations. So when it comes to, let's say, a chest workout program, I'll have them do a dumbbell only chest workout for, let's say, 2, maybe 3 weeks. And then I'll switch them to a barbell workout where they're doing incline barbell press, flat barbell press, sometimes some decline presses, rarely though. And I'll have them usually finish up with a cable crossover fly, or if they're on their dumbbell workout, I'll have them doing incline dumbbell press, flat dumbbell press, and then a low incline dumbbell fly. It's important to be able to hit every single angle when you're trying to grow your muscles, when you're trying to build your muscles, right? So don't just stick to the same routine over and over. Switch the pieces of equipment you use. Maybe 1 week, or just go for a whole machine workout for your chest. I prefer free weights myself, but there are plenty of times I work with people online and they work in a commercial gym. I say, you know what? This week, we're going to put you on all hammer strength for your chest. Next week, we're going to do all dumbbells. Following week, we're going to do all barbells. It's good to rotate and switch things up. And you don't have to switch up your whole routine. You can just take out, hey, this week, we're going to take out incline barbell press, and we're going to substitute for incline dumbbell press. Hey, we're going to take out flat dumbbell press, and we're going to put an incline barbell press, or flat barbell press. So that's the main difference, is that one is we call almost like a mass builder, which is the barbell movements, and one is more of an isolation exercise, which is with the dumbbells. You'll notice that when you do barbell presses, you're usually able to lift a little bit heavier than you are with dumbbells. Not all the time, but usually for most people. And I'm not talking by much. I'd say about 15, 20-pound difference in weight. A nice thing with the barbell too, guys, is the barbell, when you're doing a barbell press, it's somewhat easier to control. So if you are a beginner, and they have barbells that are coming 40-pound Olympic bars, or there's some bars that are 30 pounds. So most people can lift that bar. Now, if you are a completely beginner, like a complete brand new to lifting weights, I usually advise people to start with the dumbbells first, just so they can work on their stabilizers. But once you've been lifting for a few months or a few years, it's good to go back and forth. So barbell presses, more of a compound movement. Dumbbell presses, more of an isolation movement. All right. Next question. Nick, what do you think about Mick Mars retiring? Do you think he will come back and tour again, or is he done? Mick Mars, Motley Crue. I saw them in concert this past September. I had a feeling this was going to be his last tour. I think he's 72, 73 years old. He has a health condition. I can't remember what it's called, but essentially the condition he's had it, I think since he was in his early 20s, and basically the bones and the muscles start to degenerate over time. So I think it's very painful for him to be playing guitar still. I think it's like almost like a form of arthritis that he has, I believe. So that health condition he's had since his early 20s, and now he's in his 70s, so he's been dealing with it for 50 plus years now. Going on tour is hard on the body, right? Motley Crue was supposed to retire back in 2015, and they came back for this tour during COVID, but then the tour was canceled because of COVID. And then that's when the tour started again this past summer with restrictions being lifted. But to answer that question, no, I don't think he's going to tour again. I can see him coming out for like one concert, maybe if they play in LA or something, but no, I can't see him. When I saw him on stage, I mean, he was really hunched over. He looked like he was in pain just playing the guitar. I mean, he's basically crippled now. Right. So it's really hard. Imagine playing the guitar with, your muscles and your tendons all frozen up on you. And you could tell you almost feel bad for him. So no, I can't see him coming back. It sucks though, because I really think Mick Mars is one of the most underrated guitar players of all time. Honestly, he's one of the best, and you don't hear about him very, very much, but I would put him up there with probably top 5 of all time for sure. But yeah, I don't think he's going to come back. It was funny because on tour he was actually wearing his the final tour coat, Motley Crue's final tour coat from the 2015 concert tour, and people kept wondering why he was wearing that coat so much. Maybe he just liked the coat, but maybe it was a sign of things to come. So no, I don't think he's coming back. And if he does, maybe 1 or 2 concerts when they go back home to LA or something, they perform in front of the home crowd. Okay, next question. Okay, Nick, why does it hurt my stomach whenever I eat after a 12-14 hour fast? I don't fast very often, maybe once or twice each week max, but as soon as I have my first meal after a fast, I get really bloated and start to feel discomfort in my belly for a few hours. Okay, so one of the things, and I've talked about this before, in my opinion, I actually don't have a problem with intermittent fasting at all. I think intermittent fasting is very healthy to do. I'm working right now with 3 people online who are following intermittent fasted diets. However, one of the things I remind people is when you're following an intermittent fasted diet, it's not an optimal diet for building muscle and losing fat, okay? It has numerous other health benefits that I've mentioned on my blogs. I mentioned on previous Q&As, so I'm not going to cover those right now. But one of the things is if you're just intermittent fasting sporadically, you're doing it like this person once or twice a week, and then you're eating like a bodybuilder for the rest of the week, where you're eating every 3 to 4 hours. By fasting for 12, 14 hours and then having a larger meal, your body doesn't really know what to do with that. Your digestive tract doesn't know what to do with that. So you're putting your digestive tract under a lot of stress, right? If you're feeding your body every 3 or 4 hours, it's used to having that constant fuel being driven into your body, right? So when you take that away and then you fast and then you have a larger meal because now you're starving, obviously that's going to affect your digestive tract, and that's going to cause bloating and pain, right? Because it slows down your digestive system. It can slow down your metabolism. So that's actually very common. So it's just like what I tell people who do, if they want to do a particular way of dieting, I say fine, but stick to it. Do it consistently, day in, day out. If you're someone who does intermittent fasting, then you're probably going to want to do it at least 6 days a week. And maybe on the 7th day, you can have a little cheats here, or go for breakfast or something and break your fast. But it's not something that I would recommend you do just on occasion because you feel like fasting. I don't think that's good for the body. It's kind of like the same thing I tell people who do keto diets. I know people who will do keto for 3 days and then they do carbs for 2 days and they do keto again for 3 days and they can never figure out why their energy is so low. And I say, well, your body can't figure out if you're using carbohydrates as your fuel source or fats as your fuel source because you're constantly confusing it. One day you're using carbs, the next day you're eliminating them completely. So if you're going to do a diet, regardless of what I say, my only recommendation is stick to that diet. If it's intermittent fasting, then you stay on intermittent fasting for 6 days of the 7-day week. If you're doing keto, stay on keto all week and maybe have one cheat meal where you incorporate some carbs so it doesn't knock you out of ketosis. That's very important because if you start fucking around with your diets and you're saying, well, today I'm going to do this and tomorrow I'm going to do this, and what's going to happen is you're going to experience digestive tract issues, you're going to experience bloating, and yeah, you're going to feel like shit. So I would recommend not fasting if you're someone who's eating like a bodybuilder, you're eating every 3 to 4 hours, you're constantly fueling your body. Stick to that diet plan as often as you possibly can. And if you're an intermittent faster and you like intermittent fasting, do it. But again, stick to it, like 6 days a week. If your first meal is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because you're doing an intermittent fasted diet, then it should be at 3 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? Consistency, guys. That's, in my opinion, that's the main reason why you're feeling digestive issues, bloating. Your body's just not used to it. Okay. Hi, Nick. Can you explain the difference between your online one-time programs versus your online 8 and 12-week programs that are listed on your coaching app? Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Don't be sorry. The app just launched this Tuesday. So we still have a few bugs to work out, but there's quite a few programs up there right now. I believe there's 12 programs. So the one-time program design, essentially what that is, let's say you're booking a one-time transformation program that includes a customized diet plan, customized training program, and usually what I do with people who book one-time programs, I give them 2 weeks worth of unlimited questions, unlimited support. If they need to change something in your diet, I'll make those revisions to the plan, but it only lasts for 2 weeks. And after that, that's it. They're off on their own with the program. Now, an 8-week or 12-week plan, which is the plans that I usually recommend to people, is once I've designed that customized training program and or nutritional plan, depending on the package that you purchase, because you can actually book a customized training program and nutritional plan together, or you can just book one or the other. But let's say you're booking a 12-week plan. So I'll design your program for you, send it to you, and then we're going to make weekly revisions to the program as we progress. Because I'm a firm believer that you have to rotate your macronutrients in order to build muscle and lose fat naturally. Now, I'm not talking about enhanced, I'm talking naturally. I find that works very well for a lot of people. So you have me as your coach for 12 weeks. You will receive unlimited email support, answers to all your questions answered within a 24-hour time period. I'm very proactive with my online clients. Any of my online clients will tell you that. I don't give you copy and paste generic programs. I customize the plans specifically for you and specifically for what you have available to you. If you're doing home workouts, I'm not going to give you a workout that you have to go to a commercial gym for, right? If you're someone who's allergic to peanuts, I'm not going to put peanut butter or almond butter on your diet plan. So this is where it comes down to working with a coach who can really customize your program for you. And this is what I talked about last week on the channel too. So it's very important to me that when I make those revisions, I'm listening to my clients, I'm getting feedback from my clients, and I'm constantly in contact with my clients. Yeah, it's a 12-week plan, and I do bi-weekly check-ins and weekly revisions, but my clients know if they need to get in contact with me and make a revision earlier in the week because something's not feeling right or they're having digestive tract issues, we make those changes right away. We don't wait till Friday or Saturday morning check-ins. We make the changes right away. So that's the main difference. With a one-time program, you have me as your coach for about 2 weeks, where I'll make slight revisions to the plan, answer all your questions, and give you unlimited email support. And then after that, you're off to go on your own. And then the 12 or 8 week plan, you have me as your coach for the entire 8 to 12 weeks, where we make weekly revisions, bi-weekly check-ins, and of course, answer all your questions within a 24-hour time period. Both are up. Remember, if you have any questions related to our app, you can always email me at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, and I'll forward you over all the information, a link to our app, so you can subscribe today. All right, next question. Okay. Hey, Nick, I was wondering why you add lots of 25-pound plates on the bar while doing T-bar rows instead of just a few 45-pound plates. I'm just curious, as I watched you doing it in one of your videos. Good question. So whenever you're doing a T-bar row, my recommendation is to actually use, it's not that just because they're 25-pound plates, but there's 25-pound plates in the gym are smaller than the 45-pound plates. One of the biggest flaws with T-bar rows is a limited range of motion. So when you're bent over doing a T-bar row and you have a big plate and you're pointing up towards your chest, you're going to hit your chest very quickly. Now, if you're using a smaller plate, you're going to have a greater range of motion. So whenever I do T-bar rows with clients, I always load up the smaller plates. It's not always 25. So if I'm working with someone who's a beginner, I might give them a few 10-pound plates, which are even smaller. So that even increases the range of motion. But I'd rather put on 6 25-pound plates, which you can fit on a barbell, versus, let's say, 3 or 4 45-pound plates, which will even out to almost the same weight. The problem is the range of motion is very limited. So when you're doing T-bar rows, my recommendation is to use the smaller plates, load at the bar. You're going to notice a greater range of motion, and you're going to feel a way better contraction in your lats. So that's the main reason. That's a really good question. So I'm actually going to put that up on my Instagram next week with a video, because that's a question I've had before too. And I think a lot of people are confused as to why I'm using smaller plates. And when I visit commercial gyms and I watch people doing T-bar rows, I always see them loading the 45-pound plates on. And I think, man, if you just took the plate and you took it down to a 25 and you put maybe 2 25s on instead of 145, your range of motion would be way better. And you'll feel it way more. Okay. Nick, if you could go back and train in any decade, which decade would you train in and why? That's a fun question. If I could train in any decade, I think it would be the 1980s. Just, when I look back at the training videos like Lee Haney, Samir Manu, those guys back in the 80s training, even Franco Colombo before he retired, it was a different atmosphere. You look at the videos online of Gold's Gym back in the mid 80s, the early 80s, everyone there trained. There were no phones. I don't really have a problem with the phones when you're filming content for your social media channels. I get it. I do it too, but I never film myself while I'm working out. All my videos are usually demo videos. So when I'm working out, I find the phone still to this day, I find it to be incredibly distracting. So I wish, if I were training a certain decade, I'd want to train in the 80s for that reason. It's just, there were no phones. There were no cell phones. People they trained. And it was just a different atmosphere, and a lot more free weights. Now there's all these machines out there and people are doing these Zumba classes. And hey, I'm not knocking Zumba or these things, but I find that the work ethic has changed in the gym, and especially in commercial gyms. Everyone wants the latest, the quickest way to get results, and nobody wants to get into that squat rack and squat their ass all the way down to the grass. Nobody wants to do that, right? So well, maybe I can do some fun little kickbacks and go to one of these classes and just do some band work, and I'll get a great ass and great thighs. And not necessarily, or even, with some of the guys just wanting to do constant machine work. If you want to build a good foundation, it's got to be built on free weights. I'm sorry, it does. I've never seen anyone build a great physique off machines only. Maybe they can do that now because they've already built that foundation, and maybe it's, people in their 50s now who've done free weights their entire life and they have some joint issues, so they're moving on to machines and cables. But if you want to build a foundation, in my opinion, it has to be done through free weights. And that's what the 1980s were all about. The reason I choose the 80s and not so much the 90s, also, I hate the music from the 90s. So unfortunately, one of the bad things with the 80s is you wouldn't really have headphones unless you had a Walkman, but you'd have to listen to the gym music, right? Which in my opinion was much better than in the 90s. So I wouldn't choose the 90s for that reason. And I started training in the early 2000s, and yeah, I mean, there was nothing wrong with that decade either. Again, the phones were starting to become a bit of a distraction, not like they are today, but they were becoming a bit of a distraction. But I like to train in an environment where everyone around me is training super hard, super intense. And I think if I had to choose a decade, that would be the 1980s. I think that was probably the golden era of, they say there's a golden era of bodybuilding. I think that was the golden era of training in general, the 1980s. Because I tell you what, it definitely wasn't the 90s with that shitty music, and it definitely is not today with the fucking cell phones everywhere. Everyone's on their phone sitting on a bench for 10 minutes between sets. So it's definitely not this decade, I'll tell you that. All right. That was a good question. All right. Okay. Next question. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my spot here. Oh, okay. So I think actually this is the last question. This is a good question too. And you know what's funny is a friend of mine, Kelsey, who's a personal trainer in downtown Vancouver, she actually mentioned to me that I might want to bring this up on the podcast, this topic. And then after she sent me this, she sent me a link to this topic. One of my clients emailed me probably about maybe, I don't know, an hour later and asked me about the same topic. So I thought, oh, I guess it's a hot topic right now. So thanks to Kelsey and my client, I'm going to bring this topic up. So this question came from my client, and it's, Nick, do you think Zac Efron is juicy? He's added on so much muscle so quickly for his latest role. Okay, I'll be honest. I know who Zac Efron is. I could not pick him out of a lineup. I could now because I did my research on him, but I don't really pay attention to new celebrities or current celebrities, or maybe he's not a current or new celebrity. Maybe he's been around for a while. But I had to do a little research on who Zac Efron was and his whole physique change and transformation. So fortunately for me, Kelsey sent me a link to Zac Efron's interview from when he did Baywatch a few years ago with The Rock. And he was talking about how he felt like shit. And then, he had insomnia from potentially the way he was dieting for the film. He was very lean. I saw photos. I mean, he was incredibly lean. And one of the things I noticed in the interview that he mentioned was the usage of diuretics. So first of all, diuretics are the abuse of diuretics. He had mentioned he was using a lot of diuretics. I want to be clear about this. Diuretics are incredibly dangerous, really dangerous. I've taken diuretics for bodybuilding shows. And when I say I've taken diuretics, I'm saying like one diuretic cut in half. And I've used it between a span of like 12, 14 hours. And I still felt like shit, because what diuretics do is they drain the water out of you. So they make you look leaner and harder. Now, towards the end of my bodybuilding career, when I stopped competing, I actually stopped using diuretics because I would feel like shit for 2 or 3 days after I took just one diuretic. So reading the interview of him saying that he was taking diuretics, I'm like, who the hell takes diuretics? So like that many diuretics where it's causing an issue. And again, for a bodybuilding show, you take the diuretic leading up to the show you shouldn't do this, but some people take it 2 days out if they're using something like Lasix. I always used a diuretic called Diazide, and I used it if the show was Saturday morning. I would take it at 6 o'clock or Friday night, and I would take another one at maybe 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And that was it. I wouldn't take it anymore. And I still felt like crap. So when he talks about some of the issues he was having, and I'm sure some of that was from extreme dieting too. Because listen, when you go on extreme diets, you can feel like complete crap. There were some times I used to compete for bodybuilding shows, and I would feel like I'd have no energy at all, none. I would cancel sessions with clients because I just I can't do this today. So I can see that when you're doing extreme dieting, some of these diets, never mind keto, you're on no fats, no carbs, and you're just on protein. So that can definitely have an impact on you. And then psychologically too, because what happens is when you get the results and your body looks fantastic, yet you feel like shit inside, it's never good enough. So there's a little bit of body dysphoria there too, right? So everyone's like, wow, you look amazing, but you don't feel amazing because you keep thinking, I should be bigger, I should be leaner. Now, as far as the steroids, I don't know Zac Efron, so I don't know if he's on steroids. Judging from his physique, if I were to put money on it, would I say that he was doing some type of anabolic steroid cycle for Baywatch? Yeah, I imagine he was on some type of cutting cycle, using some cutting agents, maybe some Anavar, some trenbolone, testosterone, obviously. And now for his latest role, I think it's a wrestling movie. He looks like he's added on size, so he looks like he's actually now thicker, and that would probably be more of a mass cycle. So maybe something like Deca, D-ball. Again, I don't know. I don't know what Zac Efron's using steroids or not, but to get the type of results that he has right now that quickly, I would not put money and say that he's natural. But as far as the feel, because I found it really interesting. I was reading his interview about how he said he felt. And, and I honestly think, okay, take the steroids out of the equation and let's just go back to the extreme dieting, the intense workouts. That can really play a role, not just on your energy levels. It can actually have a role and effect on your libido. So that can play a huge part in how someone feels. So I totally believe it. Like he probably felt like complete garbage, and especially for someone, I don't believe he's someone who was going to the gym regularly. He's not someone like The Rock who trains every day. So for someone who goes from just your average guy who likes to go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week to having to train maybe twice a day, do cardio for an hour a day, now add on the anabolic steroids and massive amounts of food you have to eat when you're gaining muscle, or the limited amount of food that you're allowed to eat when you're trying to lose body fat. Yeah, that can be very extreme and it can have long-lasting effects. I know people who've done fitness competitions and it screwed up their metabolism so much that, I know women that have missed their period for 6 months who competed for shows. I mean, so when you go too extreme, it can definitely have an impact. So if you're asking me if I think Zac Efron's juicing, I'm not gonna put out rumors there, but I put it this way: I wouldn't put money to say that he's not. Okay, especially when I saw his physique transformation from Baywatch to then he came off, and then when he went on to this new movie role that he's doing, now he's big. So yeah, I mean, guys, I'm a perfect example. I've pretty much maintained the same size for the past decade, right? So you haven't seen me get super big, or you haven't got me see super small. So if you start to see me put on 30 pounds in 6 weeks, I'm thinking, well, maybe Nick's juicing, right? So you start to question those things. Unless he's got amazing genetics, I do not think he's natural. No. But it was an interesting article, though, and it was a really interesting interview because you can actually see how, or read anyway, about how he talks about the effects, and not just physically but mentally, of extreme dieting, extreme training. And honestly, I can relate to that. So it was interesting to hear that from someone who's got a huge platform and a huge following talk about that. But hey, he's a movie star, and sometimes you have to look a certain part for the movies. There's a lot of competition out there, and I'm sure if he didn't want to do it, someone else would do it, right? So, Zac Efron natural? You tell me. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Tuesday evening. Remember, if you have any questions related to your diet, training, or supplementation, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can also DM me your questions on Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.